Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's so great to have you all here. Today I'm going to do a video all about how I learned to knit and my top tips for anybody else who wants to learn how to knit their own clothes. Okay, so let's just dive straight in. So I think I was about 10 years old when I first learnt to knit. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I think I was about 10. I remember I was still in primary school. My parents had gone away for the week and I was spending the weekend with a family friend. And then my auntie was coming to look after me and my other siblings for the rest of the week. So I was spending this Saturday, Sunday with a close family friend, and her parents were visiting over from India. They used to come every year for quite a prolonged period of time. Yeah, so my friend's mum was a big knitter. She always used to bring her knitting with her. She always seemed to be knitting. Whenever I would like hang out with them, I always saw her knitting, and I just thought it was really cool and really interesting. And that weekend I sort of asked her to like show me what she was doing, you know, to sort of explain it a bit. So she didn't have any spare needles or spare yarn or anything, so she just sort of showed me what she was doing on her needles. And I was sort of like, oh, I really want to learn how to do this. And then my auntie came to pick me up for the rest of the week, and she said, oh well, you know, I know the basics of knitting, so I can teach you. So we got some needles and we got some yarn, and she basically taught me the real basics of casting on, knit stitch, purl stitch and casting off. I didn't learn how to read a pattern, I just learned, yeah, like the basics. And so I sort of started then just like knitting bits and bobs like scarves, you know, things that you can knit in a long straight line. There was a big sort of culture, not the right word, it was very popular at the time to knit those like fuzzy fluffy scarves where it was basically a bit like a sort of mohairy yarn but an acrylic version with like a lot of floof. And you would knit them like on quite big needles, and it would be like a lacy, you'd sort of see like holes, be a bit like a lacy design with this kind of fluff on it. So I did a couple of those, but then like I sort of lost interest because, as I say, I never really learned how to read a pattern, so I didn't really know like what to do after that. So yeah, I went on to other crafts. I've always been very crafty. I did, you know, cross stitch and card making and things like that. And then I went to school and I became a teenager, and knitting wasn't very cool, so I stopped knitting. Then yeah, I sort of dabbled a bit. I think I seem to remember like playing around a bit as a teenager, coming back to it repeatedly, especially because I got really into watching Miss Marple. I absolutely love Agatha Christie, and yeah, Miss Marple was always knitting and I was like, Miss Marple is cool, I want to be Miss Marple, you know, the usual things that like 15-year-old girls think. So yeah, I sort of dabbled with it on and off, but it wasn't until I went to uni and I really embraced my vintage fashion. So I was always really into like vintage style and vintage clothes from a very young age. And then yeah, I became an adult, left home, got some more confidence basically, and started properly dressing vintage. And I thought, you know what, I want to actually be able to you know, knit my own clothes so that I can sort of embrace this vintage style a bit more, because I often couldn't find things in the shops that were quite right. And I used to love watching all the period dramas and Poirot and things like that, seeing all the gorgeous knitwear, and I thought I'd really love to do that. So yeah, then I think I was about 20 at that point, and I went to stay with my boyfriend's, at the time he's now my husband, my boyfriend's family in Scotland, and we went to a craft shop, which was mostly a yarn shop, to pick up some stuff for his sister's Christmas present, and they had a knitting book, which was this, Nitty Gritty. So I bought it and I thought, great, I'm gonna learn to knit with this. And then on my way home I picked up a knitting magazine as well that had all like free yarn in it and stuff, and yeah, I had a go at knitting the little soft toy pattern that came, and I knitted a penguin. I called her Barbara. I was really That's when I'd first watched The Good Life, and I was like, really, I love it. It's like one of my favourite TV programmes. So I called her Barbara after Barbara Good, obviously. And yeah, and then I started knitting a cardigan, and basically, because I was such a beginner, it took so long to knit this cardigan that I just kept losing interest. It would just go in a pile, and then like I'd come back to it, and I was on and off with this cardigan for about 2 years. It was ridiculous. I really struggled with it, and in the end I did actually end up frogging it, because it was so, I don't know where I'd gone wrong, but I obviously hadn't quite read the pattern right, and it was all a bit of a mess. So yeah, that sort of takes me to like 2018. So I was 23. I just finished uni, and I thought, you know what, I really do want to learn to knit, but I'm finding like a whole garment quite overwhelming, so I am going to try knitting baby clothes, because I thought, you know, I tried to knit a garment for myself and it hadn't quite worked, and you know, a lot of the stuff I read was, it was like, be prepared for the fact that the first things you knit probably won't be wearable, and I thought, gosh, that is so much work and so much effort for something that's not wearable. So I thought, if I knit something tiny, I can practice all the stitches and I can learn what I'm doing, and it'll be done really quickly, and I can, you know, speed up basically. And so I started doing that. I actually have it here. So the first thing I ever knit was this little tiny baby hat. So this is the first pattern I ever actually properly followed. Now it's a total mess, like the sewing up at the back is just dreadful. I decided when I was learning to knit to not bother to learn mattress stitch, to just sew up in some weird fashion, so it's total mess, but it is super cute. And I learnt a lot. I think it's actually not too bad. It's not like, it's really not that bad. Looking at it now though, I can see that I've got my pearls, I've obviously done my pearls the wrong way around and they're twisted, but you know, it could be a lot worse. And then I made the matching little jacket, which again, like, look at the stitching. Yeah, this will be in my top tips at the end, but learn to sew up properly. But yeah, it was actually quite hard, because you had to like, you knitted the collar and then you sewed it on afterwards, and it was quite difficult actually. But it just gave me a real sense of satisfaction that I could sit down. So I made this during, I used to be a school librarian, so I had half term off, and I sat down during half term. We were away on holiday for the week, and every evening I just, you know, would knit a few rows, and by the end of the week I had this cardigan. So yeah, that actually worked really well for me, doing children's knits. Yeah, so that was sort of end of 2018. And then the very end of 2018, December 2018, my chronic illness, my ME, went from being fairly mild to severe, like really severe. I ended up bedbound, housebound, yeah, it was really bad. I had to leave my job. I've spoken about this before on my channel. 2019 was an extremely difficult year. I became really, really ill. And I lost the ability to pretty much do everything I've ever done. I couldn't read. I love to read. I'm a big reader. Obviously I was a librarian and I'm a writer, so I lost the ability to read. Because of brain fog, I just couldn't concentrate. I lost the ability to write for the same reason. Couldn't exercise. Yeah, could barely move, could barely leave the house. The only thing I could manage was knitting. And so that basically became a lifeline for me. You know, I've said before on my Instagram, knitting basically saved my life, because that year was horrific, and it was the only thing that gave me a sense of achievement. I liken chronic illness, it's like, you know, people can understand a bit better now. It's like being in lockdown during COVID, except you're the only one in lockdown and you're not able to fill your time with nice things because you're too ill to do them. It's like having the flu all the time, constantly, really bad flu. I've learnt to manage it now. It's not that much better. In fact, I think it's got worse in some areas, but I've learned to manage it a lot better. But that year was really, really tough, and yeah, knitting just kept me going. I watched a lot of Poirot, I watched a lot of cozy TV, and I did a lot of knitting. I made my first ever garment for myself, which I'll put up a picture, but I can show you, I've got it here. So this is the first ever garment that I made for myself. It was in Simply Knitting magazine. I think it was Simply Knitting magazine. I'm pretty sure it was. Because I didn't really have any patterns or anything. I didn't know anything about indie designers or anything like that. So I just picked up magazines and chose a pattern. And the yarn that they suggested for this pattern was West Yorkshire Spinners yarn, which is, they make some lovely yarn, do check them out. But they were selling it at my local yarn shop just by chance, with 20% off. It was a like January sale. So yeah, I picked it up, and I think I picked up enough yarn to make it for like £30. And I was really pleased with that because it was 100% wool, beautiful yarn. It's their retreat yarn, chunky. So yeah, I made this, which, you know, I still do wear all the time. It is messy and as I say, I kept getting my pearls the wrong way around, so they're all a bit twisted. I also still didn't know how to sew up, so my sewing up is absolutely appalling on the seams. But I love it. Oh yeah, and the sleeves are too short. The sleeves stop like here. Like, it's not like a 3/4 length and it's not bracelet length, it's just somewhere in the middle. But I don't care because I loved it and I wore it loads, and I still wear it loads. It's a great cozy dog walking jumper in the autumn and the winter. I would love to make something else with West Yorkshire can't say the word. West Yorkshire Spinners retreat yarn, because it was so lovely to work with. And that was, yeah, basically like the first time I'd ever followed a full-size pattern and used a really nice natural fibre yarn. And I really enjoyed the process. It was lovely. And then my husband asked me to knit him a granddad cardigan, which I did, and now that was like a total mess. So we went and just picked some yarn that he liked the look of, because he wanted it in a certain colour, rather than, you know, I didn't know anything about actually when you look in a pattern, firstly you need to get the same meterage, not the same weight, duh. Secondly, you know, you want to get something that's a similar like fabric fibre content. So it was made with the pattern was made with an acrylic yarn, and we got 50% acrylic, 50% wool, so it was really heavy. So I made this cardigan and I kept running out of yarn and being like, why am I running out of yarn? I've got what it says I need. Duh, didn't have the meterage. Yeah, it's a total mess, but bless him, I'll put up a picture. He wore it. He's worn it quite a lot. It's now become like a house jumper because I personally don't want my knitting to be represented like that in public. So yeah, but he wore it. The sweetest thing was that he wore it to the knitting and stitching show. So we went to the knitting and stitching show in 2019, which looking back now was totally crazy because I was so ill. I don't even know how I like coped. I remember sitting on the floor in so much pain, like trying to like continue looking at the stalls. Mad lady, mad lady. Next time take a mobility aid. But anyway, yeah, he wore it out and it was really cute. So yeah, then I made that, and then I went back to making children's knits, and honestly it was so good because I just learnt so much. That's when I finally learned how to do proper mattress stitch, and everything was so neat and tidy, and yeah, I learned just all the skills that you need, buttonholes and picking up stitches and all this stuff. And yeah, my little children's cardigans actually got so good. You know, I started making them for friends and stuff because everyone was having babies, as that kind of happens when you're in your mid-20s. And yeah, people started asking if they could commission cardigans. So then I started selling a few, which was really nice because, you know, as I say, 2019 was a really tough year for me. I'd given up my job and everything, so it sort of gave me a bit of a purpose. So yeah, that's sort of like how I got started with knitting. I don't do commissions anymore. I made the decision back in 2021 that I just didn't really enjoy it anymore, you know? It just wasn't really for me. I wanted to just knit for myself, so it was really good at that time, but then as I say, I got really into knitting for myself. 2021 was the first year where I started knitting in the round as well, which has been a total game changer. So I made this that I'm wearing. This is the anchor sweater. This is like my first, sorry, my camera just cut out there. Yeah, so this is the anchor sweater from Petite Knit, which was my first in the round. I've knit it in, I just had this yarn in my stash. It is Berger de France, which is, excuse my pronunciation, which is a French yarn. I think it's called Ecoton, and it is recycled cotton, and I think it's the colour Celadon, which I think just means like teal in French, maybe. Anyway, it's really lovely. So I knit that. And at the end of last year, I also knit the Aosta sweater by Sophie, the Knit Pearl Girl, which was just like, oh, the most lovely thing to knit. And I love it so much, it's so cozy. So now I'm like fully knitting in the round all the time. I mean, I say that, I also love to knit flat as well. I've done quite a lot of work over the last few years, collaborations with Mode at Rowan and Quail Studios. You know, they sort of gift me quite a lot of yarns and projects, which is really lovely, and all of those are knit flat. So I'm not really bothered. A lot of people are sort of one or the other, but I personally am quite happy to do both. I understand a lot of people find sewing up at the end quite frustrating, and I can see that, but sometimes it's actually just really like, you know, meditative and really nice. But yeah, basically that's how I learnt to knit. So I'm gonna give my top tips now. So my first top tip would be to use YouTube. Oh my word, I still use it all the time now. Every time I get stuck, I simply just type into YouTube. You know, like when you're reading a knitting pattern and it says whatever, M1 or MB or something, and you don't know what that means. I mean, obviously there's normally an abbreviation list at the front of a pattern which will tell you make bobble or make one right or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily help you if you don't know how to do that. And even now, like, I've done these stitches before and I've just completely forgotten how to do them because I have chronic fatigue and brain fog, so I forget all the time. So YouTube is like my best friend. I'm always on my phone on YouTube whilst I'm knitting. I find that really helpful. Getting a book like this can be really good. I did find it helpful in the beginning, but I would say that they're often a bit like old-fashioned, the things. I didn't really want to make much in here, but it depends on your style. You might be able to find, like these days, you know, indie pattern designers, a lot of them have brought out really nice books. You know, it's worth having a look on Amazon because that can be a nice way to sort of start and not have to spend too much money if you get a book for like £15 and you can just work your way through the patterns rather than buying individual patterns. So that can be a really, really great thing. I would also say as well, like when you first start knitting, it is so important to swatch. I did not swatch. I still sometimes don't swatch, and it's so naughty, and I had a massive cock up recently because I didn't swatch. So if you don't know what a swatch is, basically it'll tell you at the beginning whatever, like 20 stitches, 28 rows equals 10 centimeters or something on 4mm needles. So you knit that up as a square, and if it doesn't come out as a square in that size, then you need to like downsize or upsize your needles. So yeah, that's one of the most important things. Also, doing little swatch squares are really great for practicing. You know, if you're worried about a stitch or you want to try something, a different type of cast on or something, you know, doing a little swatch is a really great way to just sort of start with that. So yeah, swatch away. Okay, so I just thought I'd give you a few beginner pattern suggestions as well. So firstly, the anchor sweater, I would 100% recommend as a great beginner pattern. If you know how to knit and you know how to purl, that's pretty much all you need to do, and cast on and cast off. As I say, you can pretty much YouTube everything. It's a petite knit pattern. I'll link all of this below, but it's a petite knit pattern, and her instructions are fantastic. She is a great designer, so talented, really beautiful things. This is the only petite knit pattern I've made so far, but I'm really looking forward to doing some more in the future because I just love her stuff. It's also short sleeved, which is quite nice, you know. It knits up really quickly. I mean, there is a long sleeve version if you want to do a sweater version, but it knits up really quickly, so I'd 100% recommend this as a beginner pattern. I would also recommend the Aosta sweater by the Knit Purl Girl. I've mentioned Sophie like 15 times in this video. I hope it's not getting obsessive and creepy. So yeah, but her sweater, I mean, all of her knitting patterns are fantastic. Just go check out her website, I will link it below. The Aosta sweater is a really great beginner pattern because, again, as long as you can knit and you can purl, that's all you need to be able to do, really. You know, there are, like, it does raglan increases, but she explains it so well. There's YouTube videos to help, you know. I found it a really easy pattern to follow. One of the benefits of the Aosta as well is that it's on, gosh, I can't remember, is it 6 or 7mm needles? Maybe both. It's on big needles, so it knits up really quickly. And that's another thing that I would suggest, is if you're starting out, it's often better to start with chunky projects. Anything sort of, you know, I mean, you don't have to. I mean, DK and Aaron aren't that difficult either, but just you can see your mistakes better, and a lot of, you know, knitters find that easier because it knits up really quickly. And I think if I went back, you know, I love doing the children's knits, but I probably could have knitted up some chunky stuff just as quickly. So yeah, another pattern, I mean, this is a whole book that I would suggest along that vein with the chunky knit, is this, which is the Modert Rowan Big Wool. So it's got 6 projects in there. I think it's a hat, 2 scarves, 2 jumpers and a cardigan. I've made the cardigan, and I think I'm going to make one of the jumpers. But these are so easy. Loads of them are knit on like 8 to 10mm. They knit up really quickly. Big wool isn't the cheapest, it is expensive. I think it's about £10 a ball. It's 100% merino. So if you're a beginner, you might want to start with something else. When you're looking for a yarn, I would really suggest looking at Yarn Sub. It's a really great website. So this is another tip. I really should have like bullet pointed and counted these, shouldn't I? I hope this isn't too confusing. So yeah, use Yarn Sub. I still use Yarn Sub all the time. Look at the fibre content of the yarn and try and match it up as much as you can. If you're obviously wanting to go with an acrylic so it's a lot cheaper and easier to wash and stuff, then obviously the fibre content will be different, but often Yarn Sub will have an option for that. So Yarn Sub is a really helpful one to look at. But yeah, these patterns are really easy to follow. I think one of the great things is that you could just start with a scarf. So it's got a really nice scarf pattern, and then there's also a really lovely hat pattern, which is a cable knit, so that's a little bit more complicated. But yeah, you could just make your way through these, and they're, you know, really lovely and stylish. There's another scarf pattern with bobbles, and then there's the Haze cardigan, which I've made, which is super easy to do. The hardest thing is the bobbles, because it's all in garter stitch, which is just knit stitch. So yeah, I would really recommend the Modert Rowan Big Wool book, because it is really helpful and easy, and you can make projects up really quickly. So yeah, those are my top tips for learning to knit. I hope that wasn't too confusing and all over the place. My brain's a bit like, woo! just trying to get all the information out there. But yeah, I hope that was helpful to some of you. If you do have any questions, please do pop them in the comments below and I will try to answer them for you. I am really happy to, you know, try and help you with your knitting journey. I love knitting. As I said earlier in the video, it basically saved my life, so I love sharing it with the world. So I'm really happy to talk about it all day, every day, constantly. So yeah, you can also find me on Instagram at Stitch and Pearl, Stitch_and_Pearl. I will have that linked in the description below. If you like the video, please give it a like, and if you want to see more, because there's going to be loads more coming, including an exciting new series which I'm hopefully going to announce very soon, then please do subscribe, stick around, hang out with me, it's just me, and well, Pearl the dog. She doesn't really make an appearance, but she's there. She makes her presence known. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video and I will see you next time. Thanks guys, bye!